Narberth, Pennsylvania, a quiet, suburban town just outside Philadelphia. Most people know it for its charming streets, family-owned shops, and safe neighborhoods. But hidden in its history was something far darker, an old church that locals whispered about but rarely dared to approach. It was a decaying relic from the 1800s, long abandoned after fire had gutted its interior decades earlier. Children growing up in Narberth told ghost stories about it, about voices in the halls, shadows in the windows, and how people who entered sometimes felt as though they weren't alone. One October evening, for friends, Ryan, Megan, Chris, and Lily decided they'd explore the church for themselves. They weren't ghost hunters. They weren't even skeptics. They were just bored 20-somethings, curious about the stories they'd heard since childhood. Place looks like it's gonna fall down on us, Chris joked as they pushed through the overgrown weeds. Ryan shined his flashlight up at the weathered steeple, its cross barely hanging on. One night, we go in, we check it out, and then we can say we've done it. The doors were chained shut, but one side had rotted enough of them to slip through. Inside, the air was damp and heavy. Their footsteps echoed across the cracked wooden floors. The pews were overturned, and hymnal books were scattered and blackened with mold. Stained glass windows, some broken, some intact, cast fractured colors onto the warped floorboards. Lily whispered, "It smells like smoke, like a fire." They pressed deeper into the church, their flashlights sweeping across shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should have. The nave gave way to hallways leading into smaller rooms, some filled with broken furniture, others completely empty. The silence was suffocating. At 1553, they reached the stairwell leading down into the basement. "Of course there's a basement," Megan muttered. "This is where the creepy stuff always happens." The stairs groaned as they descended. The basement walls were stone and wet with condensation, and the floor was littered with debris. Old filing cabinets sat rusted in the corners, and the remains of what once might have been a kitchen or storage area spread out before them. And then, at 1723, it happened. The heavy basement door they'd come through slammed shut with a deafening bang. Lily jumped, nearly dropping her phone. What the hell was that? Ryan spun around, shining his light on the door. It's old wood, probably the draft. But Chris shook his head. "There's no draft down here, man." Silence followed, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, making every breath sound too loud. "Let's just check it out," Ryan said, trying to stay calm. He led them toward a side corridor that curved deeper underground. That's when they discovered it. At 1812, they entered a small hidden room. Inside stood an antique dresser covered in dust. A cracked mirror hung above it, smeared with what looked disturbingly like dried, reddish stains. Megan shined her flashlight on the dresser top. "You guys, look at this." She picked up a photo frame lying face down. Inside was a faded black and white photograph of a woman in a wedding dress. The edges were burned and her face was obscured, almost as if it had been deliberately scratched out. "Who keeps something like this in a church basement?" Lily whispered. Before anyone could answer, a noise echoed through the darkness. A scraping sound, slow, deliberate, coming from deeper in the corridor. "Okay, nope," Chris said, backing up. "That's it. We're done. We're leaving." They hurried back toward the stairwell, but the air felt heavier now, colder. Every step echoed too loudly, as if someone or something was following just behind them. At 1920, as they reached the main floor and bolted toward the exit, Ryan made the mistake of looking back. Through one of the cracked stained glass windows, he saw it, a silhouette, a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still in the upstairs window. Its outline was sharp against the pale moonlight. It wasn't one of his friends, and it wasn't a trick of the glass. He froze for half a second, unable to breathe. The figure didn't move, didn't sway. It just watched. "Ryan, come on!" Megan screamed, yanking him forward. They ran out of the church and didn't stop until they were blocks away. When they finally caught their breath, Ryan tried to explain what he saw, but his friends cut him off. "We don't talk about it," Megan said firmly, her face pale. "We never talk about it again." And they didn't. But Ryan never forgot. He could still picture that silhouette in the window, and worse, the way it seemed to be staring directly at him. Months later, word spread that the abandoned church had been demolished. Officially, it was for safety reasons. The foundation had weakened, and the building was considered dangerous. But in Narberth, people whispered another story, that the church had been condemned not for its walls, but for the things that lingered inside: the dresser, the mirror, the photograph of the faceless bride, and the shadow that still watched from the windows. If you ever find yourself in Narberth, Pennsylvania, and you hear people talk about the old church that once stood there, remember this story. Some buildings are abandoned for a reason, and some things don't stay gone, even when the walls come crashing down. Ghost, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling true horror tales every week. And if you've ever had a terrifying encounter of your own, drop in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never ignore the shadows.